All right, so I want to talk about the next thing here. It's called an encumbrance. Once again, this is a method or a right that will inhibit one of your 5 rights. There are several different types of encumbrance. An encumbrance means gets in your way or causes problems, and these all get in your way of one of the 5 rights. Once again, taking power from you, okay? It is an interest in ownership. It's not full ownership. And this goes, Dusty, I think you asked this question the other day about this piece of land and an easement. We're going to get into it right here. It is an interest in real estate. An interest is a future ownership, or I have an interest in the property. I don't own it. There are 2 types of encumbrances. One of them is called an encumbrance. Kind of like New York, New York. New York, city, state, what? I don't know. It's New York, New York. An encumbrance is an encumbrance. All right? It usually deals with ownership interest. A lien is an encumbrance. Liens are monetary in nature. Mortgages, taxes, those kind of stuff. We're going to do a whole chapter on monetary liens. It is sometimes you hear it called a monetary encumbrance, and the other ones are non-monetary encumbrance. All right? If you fail to pay your mortgage, you go into foreclosure, and they put a lien on your property and all that. That's a monetary encumbrance because you borrowed money. Taxes, monetary encumbrance. We'll talk all about those. Right now, I want to talk non-monetary encumbrance. I'm on page 56. So, easements are an encumbrance. We talked here is liens are monetary, real estate taxes, mortgage, judgments, mechanics liens, all of that. Private restrictions are an encumbrance, liens are an encumbrance, and encroachment, that's a general term. We'll talk all about that. Private restrictions are an encumbrance. We call them deed restrictions. There are some properties that get sold where the builder puts a condition subsequent on the property. I'll sell you this lot to build your house, but you got to build a 5,000 square foot house at a minimum with all brick and a basement in it and the garage facing backwards. Why? Because every other house in here is based like that. And we certainly don't want you going in and building a 2-bedroom modular home next to a 7,000 square foot brick house. So the builder is going to tell you how to build your house. You don't want to build that? Don't buy the property. It is a deed restriction. It's a condition subsequent. He's telling you what to do. You don't have full control. Well, I wanted to build a mobile home. You don't have that control now because you bought this lot in this housing addition, which has a deed restriction, which says you got to build 5,000 square foot minimum. All right? Kensington Grove. Or Place or whatever. Right down here in Center Grove. What's the other one you just mentioned? Clay Terrace. Yeah. You got to build a certain house. You can't do this, can't do that. We want it this, got to be 2-story, got to yada, yada, yada. The builder will put that on. It's called the deed restriction or private. Sometimes we hear it called a CCR, Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions. One day I said CCR, Covenant, not the band. Some young kid goes, who's CCR? I'm like, you, out. CCR is an American band from the 50s and 60s. All right? So covenants, conditions, or restrictions are the builder telling you how to do it. There's another restriction, which are becoming a big pain in everybody's butt right now. What are they? HOAs. That's a private restriction that we've done to ourselves.
What about the
Historical society could be a restriction. If you live in a house on the registry, yeah, any of those. They want to come through and say, we're going to make this a historical registry, and your house now gets on the registry of historic places, and everybody goes, woohoo! Now you have to redo your house, and you can't use vinyl windows. You got to put wood sash back in. So your window replacement went from $180 to $700 now. The one I could never remember the place, the Woodruff Place. Woodruff Place, a friend of mine, her and her husband lived there. They had a roof leak, so they took the roof off, started to put the roof back, and the mayor came in and said, hey, you know, you can't use 3-tab asphalt shingles on a roof. We have restrictions and zoning here that says you got to put that clay tile back, that slate tile, because we want that look and feel of all these homes. Her roof went from like $7,000 to $17,000 because of a CCR. All right? The biggest one I want to talk about is what's called an easement. An easement is the right of a person to use someone else's property to gain access to their property. All right? An easement is the right of someone else to use your property. That puts some hamper on your control. All right? Airspace. You can sell your airspace easement. There could be an airspace easement. The runway we were just talking about, there's an easement over that Kroger's airspace for the airplanes to land because the government took that. Now, on the top of page 57 is this drawing. And let me give you the backstory on Bob and Bill here, because without this backstory, this makes no sense. Obviously, Lot A, I'm going to reproduce this picture up there. Here's A, here's B. Bob owned all 20 acres at one time. Bob needed some money, so what Bob did is section off 10 acres, built a house, and sold it to Bob. Unfortunately, that 10 acres was wooded, and now, I guess this would be better, should be Alan and Bob. All right? Bob can't get to the main road because of all the forest and the trees and all of that. So when Alan divvied off that property, the title company said, you must give them access to that real estate because possession is one of the rights. You cannot sell land and not give him a way to access that land. So Alan had to create an appurtenant easement to that property. So,
would it be Alan's problem?
Yes.
Because Bob can cut down those trees to
No.
do that, right?
It's 100-acre woods. It's the Rocky Mountains. Yes, it's Alan's problem because Alan's the one that subdivided this and is trying to make the money. He cannot sell that 10 acres to somebody and not give them access to it. Now, if Alan wanted to cut 10 acre of the 100-acre woods and put a driveway there, then maybe, but that's still Alan's problem. So let's go with that. Alan has two choices. Make a driveway through the 100-acre wood or let him drive over the corner of his land. He goes, okay, I'll let him drive over. I will give them an easement. It's called an easement appurtenant or appurtenant easement. I hope, yeah, that's good. It was recording. I thought, oh, I think I forgot to press the record button. And that 100-acre woods is a problem. Why? Because then you got Winnie the Pooh in there. Right? 100-acre woods, everybody? Got it. Okay, good. We're good. Yeah, 100-acre wood. Christopher Robin, Winnie the Pooh. Yeah, forget it. We did on day one when she asked this question. I told her we were going to get to it. Now we're to it. Okay. All right? So Alan gives Bob an appurtenant easement because Bob has to get to the property. You can't sell the property without giving him possession. Alan still owns that property. He still maintains it. It's just the right of Bob to use his property to gain access. And on an appurtenant easement, or an easement appurtenant, sometimes you hear it called, it's a public right. So the pizza guy can drive across to bring the pizza, the UPS guy, all of Bob's friends, the police, everybody. It's a public right to get to Bob's house through using Alan's land. He has given up control, right? So Alan has given up some control of his property. That makes him the servient property or servant property. Bob, who is taking the right of Alan's land to get to his house, becomes the dominant property. He is taking that guy's property for his use. Makes him dominant property. So far, so good? Now let me change the story. Lo and behold, there was also a lake on this 20 acres up here in the corner. And Alan said, when I divvy off the 10 acres, the lake becomes on Bob's side, but I really want to use it. So he also creates an easement from his property to the lake so that he can go back and use the lake. On your book, in section or figure 4.2, I always have people draw that easement in so you can remember. From the house on A to the lake back in B, like on the screen, or if you're at home watching, the one on here. All right? So there's a second easement I want to talk about. But watch this. Alan is now taking the use of Bob's property to get to the lake. Everybody understand that? That makes Alan what? Dominant. Bob is giving up the use of some of his land to Alan. That makes Bob the servant or servient tenement. So dominant and servant are dependent upon which easement we're talking about. In the road easement, Alan is the servant property. In the lake easement, Alan's the dominant one. It all is based on who's taking and who's giving. These are easement appurtenant. Easements also, and you see this term a lot, it's called run with the land. Easements run with the land, not the owner. So what that means is, if Bob now sells to Charlie, the easement still stays there. So Charlie now has the right to drive over Alan's land to get there, because an easement survives the closing. That becomes important when you get to title work and they say, well, there's an easement on the property. Well, it's going to be there after the closing for the next party. It runs with the land or survives the closing. That's another way. Until it doesn't. Question was forever and ever. There are ways you can cancel out an easement. All right? It's called vacate it. Suppose Alan decides he wants all 20 acres back, so he buys the house from Bob and rejoins the 20 acres back. You can vacate that easement because there's no need for it. All right? Or suppose Charlie comes in and decides he's willing to pay the money to drive through the 100 acres, so he creates a really cool driveway through the trees and all that, and there's no need for that easement. He can remove that easement and release it. So it is there until something happens. Typically a release by one owner, and they release it because they join the properties back, or there's no need for it anymore. Those are typical reasons to release that easement. It will always be on the title.
It's not on, we own some land, and there is an easement, there's a house right on the edge of it, and their road is on our property.
Is it on your title work?
No,
Then it's not their land.
but I think it was on the original.
No. Unless there was a vacation, and that's a very bad word you guys don't get. They vacated it. Not like I went away to Jamaica. They vacated the property or they released the property, then that should have been recorded. Then it wouldn't be on your title. But if there's no release, it's either A, on your title, or B, there's no easement there. What you're saying can't happen. Can't have an easement that's not recorded.
So that's the only way they can get to their house. It's land up in the northeast that we purchased.
Then it's got to be recorded somewhere, because if it's not recorded, they're driving on your property. They're trespassing. I mean, you got to have one or the other. If it's not there, then there's no easement. There can't be an easement that's not recorded.
Could there have been a few years ago and it never made it to our title? It was a mistake?
Well,
And then they had to research it back?
theoretically, yes, because humans are human. Could there have been a mistake? That's why you pay title insurance, and you would claim an insurance policy. Something that blatant, I would hardly doubt there's that kind of mistake, especially if it was on the title. You know, if it was recorded the first time it got recorded, maybe. But if it was on a title when you bought it, and it's not on this title on the out, that's wrong. I mean, that's actually not possible. I'm just going to tell you, there's something there that you're missing. It survives the closing. Closing is a black box. Consider this black box. All these things go into the black box. When you sell your house, you're going into the closing. You've got a mortgage, you've got taxes, you've got an easement, you've got a mechanics lien, let's say. Closing, we do all this magic hocus pocus, and we pay your lien off, we bring your taxes current, we pay off all of that, and then you transfer ownership to the next person. When it comes out the other side, that easement's still there, because you cannot get rid of the easement. You can't pay anybody off to get rid of an easement. It's a non-monetary closing. It survives the closing. So coming out on the other side, that easement's still there. It's got to be. I can't imagine a title company having title and seeing this non-monetary easement and not translating it to the new title. I mean, I have seen stupid things, so I'll believe you, but it makes no sense how that can be done. Somewhere in there, somebody may have recorded a release. I mean, what you're saying legally can't exist. There's got to be a mistake somewhere then, because you cannot have an easement that's not recorded somewhere for that person to prove I have the right to drive on your property to get to my cabin up in the woods. Otherwise, they are trespassing. Now, we can do this thing here in a minute that we're going to call easement by necessity, or no, that's not the one I want, where they force it, prescriptive easement, but even a prescriptive easement gets recorded. That's how everybody knows it's there.
So am I overthinking it when
Yeah.
Those two easements aren't connected in any way?
Nope.
Okay.
It's two separate easements recorded two separate places. All right?